Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Thursday, April 21st, 2022, and we got two very special guests this morning from the Omaha Star, Terry Sanders, the publisher there in Nebraska, and also from the Cincinnati Herald is Andrea Carter. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
It's good to see both of you, and we'll get right into it. He was the most electric and arguably the most talented popular music superstar ever. His badness behind the microphone was equaled only by his superior talents on instruments like the bass and electric guitar, drums, and piano. As an example of just how cool and how amazing he was, the night he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he jammed out at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, then hit up a place called Club Black, where he took the stage at about 2:30 in the morning and played until 6:30 in the morning. No doubt, he went back to his hotel, had some pancakes, and jammed some more. With 7 Grammy Awards and an Oscar and countless other trophies, Prince will always reign as the preeminent genius of music. 6 years ago today, the world lost Prince Rogers Nelson. Terry, I know you have a great story among many stories that you have. Talk about Prince a little bit and your experience.
So I've seen him live here in Omaha, but more importantly than that, I've been to the Paisley Palace, and it is something to see. Um, One thing that's notable, you will not take any pictures in the Paisley Palace. They take your cell phone and put it in a lockbox and give it back to you when you're done. But I toured with a friend of mine, and she actually babysat for one of his sisters. And when we got to the gift shop, one of the sisters was there. So I have pictures with her. So it was very memorable, but you're right. He was Mr. Bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned his concerts. No more electrifying person on that stage, Andrea, than Prince.
It, you know what? I am such a huge fan of Prince. In fact, I was going through my the music that I have on my phone, and I have his Hit and Run album and Sign of the Times on my phone. And not to mention what I have in my CD collection. That yes, I can say that CD collection. And I am such a huge fan. He was such an icon. I mean, I grew up with Prince, and I didn't really appreciate Prince until I was in college and Sign of the Times came out, and that just spoke to me. I mean, it was just explicit. It was badass, if I can say that. And it was just so good. And he's an icon. I mean, what can you do? I never got to see him in concert. I only had to see him through the live performances on television. And, but it's just one of those things that you knew that his music is iconic and will always be there.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you talk about his concerts. I've been to many Prince concerts, including the one that I talked about in the opening, that he came on at 2:30 in the morning and left the stage at 6:30 in the morning. But more importantly for me personally, I remember one of my first dates with my wife. We went to see Prince at his musicology tour. We sat first row by the stage where he would come down to change clothes, and it was just amazing to see him up close like that. But I guess I'm going to say more importantly, but just as importantly, the Purple Rain concert way back when in 1985 was so iconic. In fact, they just re-released and re-digitalized the concert, and it's a special release now, the Purple Rain concert from the Syracuse Dome in Syracuse, New York. An amazing display of just great talent. You know, I'm going to go to you, Terry, because I remember a story about Prince that was told to us on this program last year by Jerome Benton of the Time. He talked about how when Prince was younger, when they first started out, Prince opened for the Rolling Stones, and he was booed off the stage. They was throwing things on the stage. You know, a black rock and roll
Little did
guy
they know.
going on stage with the Rolling Stones. But Prince went back the next day, even though the band, the Revolution, was telling him, no, we don't want to do this. Prince was like, no, we're going to do it. And it propelled him into being able to take whatever came his way.
Wow. I mean, that's the kind of performer he was. From what I know, that's the kind of person he was. He did not miss. There is a gentleman that lives here that used to live in Minneapolis that um, managed a theater, and he gave him one of the first opportunities to perform there in Minneapolis. And he says, "Who is this kid?" I said, "Now you know." So yeah, there are a lot of stories about him, uh, unsung hero that he was in the beginning, but as you say, iconic when he left.
I think also that people miss the fact that he was such a prolific writer of
Yes.
songs, and also for other performers, the
Mhm.
people you would never suspect, some you do. But I mean, his ability to take what's going on in the world and transform it into music is incredible, and how he was able to express it. I mean, what he did with the Batman album is unbelievable. I mean, who would think Batman would be like that with Prince? But it was such, the movie didn't live up to the album. And normally
Right.
the album usually doesn't live up to the movie. And it was the other way around. But that's how iconic it was. He made Batman special, even though it wasn't that great of a film.
Yeah,
But I mean,
And
you think it was his musical genius, and he played most of his own instruments, which I thought was incredible too. And he was so big in stature, even though he was a small man,
right.
because
yeah.
you
You
always
talk
forget he's
about
the short guy. So
Yeah,
And
you
the
talk
one
about the Batman album. There's a great line in one of his songs, the Electric Chair is called, the song is called. He says, "If a man is guilty for what goes on in his mind, then give me the electric chair for all my future crimes." I just thought this guy comes up with
wow.
everything. And also, Andrea mentioned the Sign of the Times album. A lot of people, when they think of Prince, automatically you think of Purple Rain and perhaps
mhm.
even 1999. But the Sign of the Times album, which Rolling Stone and Billboard say is one of the best albums in history, which I totally agree with. Was such a, it was a double album, and it
Yeah.
was such a great show of what he could really do. As you mentioned, the guitar, the drums, the piano, all of it is highlighted on Sign of the Times like never before. Um, Terry, you must have a favorite Prince album.
You know what? I like Sign of the Times, and of course, Purple Rain. But the one thing that I think people don't talk about enough is his brilliance as a businessman and an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
How he owned everything. You know, the vault that he had in the, I call it the basement of his house. You know, unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Still
Yeah, we
songs
have
that have not been released.
We have several comments. I just want to lift them up. Austin Cooper, he says, "I lost a part of my childhood when Michael Jackson passed, and
Mm.
adulthood when Prince died."
Mhm.
And Claudette Perry, our executive administrator of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, she says, "I flew all the way to Denver to see Prince. One of the best shows I've ever seen. He showcased Maceo, yep, from the James Brown Band, and other iconic musicians. He gave you your money's worth and then some. There's no question about it."
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
the other thing, right? Andrea and Terry, Prince also was the type of artist, he was comfortable enough to write songs and produce songs for other artists. There was the Bangles, there was Sinead O'Connor with that huge hit, Nothing Compares to You. Shaka Khan, I Feel
Mhm.
for You. It goes on. Sheila E. You name them. Prince
Yes.
wrote for them,
Yes.
and he did a lot of the time music. You could hear that sound. And you mentioned the business acumen. Prince was 15 years old. And this was a great story that I remember. He was 15 years old. He had left his parents' house a couple years earlier. He was basically not necessarily homeless. He was living with his cousin. The situation at home was so volatile. He didn't have any money. Warner Brothers talked to Prince at 15, and Prince refused to sign a contract with them because they did not want him to play and produce his music. He said no. A year later, Warner Brothers came back and said, "Okay, show us what you got, kid. I mean,
Mhm.
this is Prince for you."
Yeah.
Also, but I think what people are missing, Prince was also a great jazz artist. And I've lost this album, but I remember back in the when I was in college, I discovered it when things were on tape. He had a jazz album that he did, and he numbered the songs on that, and it was just it showed a variation of this side of me of his music ability that you didn't know about. I
Right.
mean, it was so good. And I'm sorry I've lost that album, but it is just when you talk about Maceo and how he showcased him, I'm sure they had jam sessions where the
Oh,
jazz was off the chain.
no doubt.
And I mean, and I'm just sorry that he never did a jazz album. And that was something that I think sometimes he did those things to cleanse his palate musically, so to speak, so he could come back and give us the greatness. And he was great at that. And I'm just sorry he just didn't do it. It's just his virtuoseness of what he was able to do, whether it was rock, whether it was country, whether it was whatever, he was very good at, and he wrote it. And I think that was his um his greatness, is that he was so versatile in his
Yeah.
talent that no matter what you look at, whether it's from business to music to writing to singing, even performing a certain instrument, he did it all and did it well.
Yes.
Well, we mentioned earlier his Purple Rain concert. There's the song "Delirious" that he performed at that concert, and you mentioned how he would do certain things. I recall in that concert where he, with the song "Delirious," he kind of did a great Elvis impersonation. Actually, I think he did Elvis better than Elvis did Elvis. So that's just how great Prince was. If you go back and look at that particular clip from the Purple Rain concert and the song Delirious, which is the second song in the set after Let's Go Crazy. Terry, before we move on to the next topic this morning, of course, we could talk about Prince all day.
Yes.
Yes.
Just wanted to throw it back to you because, again, we know you have so many Prince memories and stories.
Yes. It's just, even though he passed away 6 years ago, to be in that Paisley Palace was phenomenal. You could feel it. You could feel him there. And they left it just as he left it. The studio, music open, keyboard up, all of that. Motorcycle on the sound stage, just everything. And so it is something to see. If you haven't seen it, go see it. If you're a Prince fan, you will really be delirious.
Well, David Youngblood said, I was just jealous of his talent and looks as I jammed to his music with everyone else. And James Wright is watching. James says, I remember New Year's Day in 1999 when a lot of programs played. 1999 when New
Yeah.
Year came in. I'll do you
Yeah.
one better, James. That night, 1999, Prince played a concert at Paisley Park that was broadcast. I believe it was HBO. I could be wrong, but I remember watching it that night, and Lenny Kravitz joined him on stage. And you talk about rocking out.
Oh,
They
yeah.
totally rocked out.
Wow.
Claudette Perry, again, our executive administrator, she says there was an interview with Eric Clapton. And you know, Eric Clapton could play that guitar,
Yes.
where he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
asked, how does it feel to be the greatest guitarist in the world? Eric replied, I don't know. Let's ask Prince. How about that? I love it.
Yes.
Prince Rogers Nelson, we certainly miss that most talented human being. We also gonna miss Blackish, the ABC family comedy that ended its 8-year run Tuesday night. The series came to a close with Anthony Anderson's Andre Johnson quitting his job and moving the family out of the familiar Sherman Oaks, California home they shared for the past 8 seasons. Blackish, what a show. People likened it to as a modern day Cosby show. Andrea, I know you were a fan of the show.
Yes.
What were your
Uh,
thoughts? And do you agree that Blackish was a modern day Cosby show?
yes. As someone who grew up with Cosby and watched a different world, yes, it was. I would say it was a good updated version of the Black sitcom family show, because it tackled in its own way everyday subjects that we all face, that America needs to know about, even if they don't experience. Some accepted it, some don't. But I think I like the fact that they showed the drama that goes on at the workplace and the lack of information the boss has, but they think they know and try to dictate what they know on your experience. And, Dre tried to educate, but at some point you get tired of educating, you get tired of proving. And I think that's probably the reason why he ended up quitting his job, because here he was, a successful Black man living in a successful neighborhood, raising his family, being able to buy everything that he could buy to supply for his family, and he still has to prove himself.
Right.
At some point, you get tired. Some point you have to say, either accept me and my ability. And he's the one who drove the success of the company. And he's still, I don't think he even made partner. The owner didn't even recognize that success, just said, okay, let's, Dre, do what you do. And they just kept running with it. And I think at some point you get tired of not being acknowledged for who you are, and what you can do for a company. You should be rewarded for that. He never was, so he went and off and found his own reward. And I thought that was interesting, because normally you don't end a sitcom like that. Normally they end usually on upbeat notes, happy, blah, blah, blah. This time around, they were happy because they're moving to a different neighborhood and choosing their own dream instead of what society said. And I thought that was unique.
Yeah, and Terry, I'm going to borrow a phrase from Spike Lee. We see a lot of things in which some people can label buffoonery, right? This was not that, right? This was
No.
a successful Black family doing
Right.
successful things.
And the one thing that I enjoyed about this last episode, the fact that they brought Simone Biles in and she told him, do a gut check. Really? Is this really what you want? And we all know she drove her own train at the Olympics. No, I'm not performing. I'm not going to do this because I don't feel it. And I thought that was great, that they introduced her into his decision. I am a former person who lived in New Orleans. I can't claim New Orleans as my home. But that second line in that funeral at the end, and those gentlemen carrying out that white casket, that was powerful. Because, that was the end of an era. And that's how they chose to let it go. And so brought a tear to my eye. I thought, wow, how many times do we just hang on and hold on when it's done? The crayon is finished, out of color. And that's basically what they did. They made their own decision to leave and did it as a family unit. The neighbor that came and said, oh, are you moving? And we got bets on this. Get out of here. That wasn't it.
Well,
that was not it.
How important, Andrea and Terry just said, leaving on their own terms, how important that they ended the show before the show ended them. In other words, being pulled off the air.
I think it was important to end on a high note, because if you think about it, they tackled a number of subjects that most shows would not tackle. And they took it head on. I think there's one show they didn't even show because I think it touched a nerve too much, even to the higher ups in the broadcast industry. They couldn't handle the truth. And I think that's the one thing about Blackish, is that they gave you the truth, not only the truth, but the experience of what a Black family went through, being stopped by the police, being gay, a gay family member, and having to accept that or not accept that, or coming to grips with that. You still love them. They're still members of the family. You just can't accept they're different from what you are.
Their life choice.
The life choice, I think the life choices and the life experiences they showcase better than the Bill Cosby show showcase. Bill Cosby was a sanitized version of what we experienced, but they were the first. Blackish may have been the second one, not the second, but of the sitcom families that we have seen, they took it to another level to show the truth about Black life. And you can't put us in this one box and think that we're all from the ghetto. We're all have this certain background. Daddy doesn't live in the home. Well, daddy does live in the home. Daddy disciplines. Granddad gives great advice. Grandma gives great advice. And they all have unique experiences that teach the young people what to do and what not to do, or at least learn from what they have experienced and then let them find their own truth. And I think that's the brilliance of Blackish, that to say, you think you know Black life, but you don't.
But you don't.
And and you can't put us in a box. Because I remember when the Cosby Show came out, many people did not believe that there were Black middle class families
Right.
and how they lived. And I was like, that's stupid. You live in a
Right.
middle class family. I mean, I remember when I was working at a newspaper and it was in a mountain town, and they were questioning my background and wanted to know, well, I guess you're not used to living this way or that way. And I said, excuse me. I said, my father has a doctorate and he teaches in the university 3 hours away from here. I said, my mother is a principal at an elementary school. My family has master's degrees. I'm behind because I don't have one. I'm still behind because I don't have one. I said, the expectations of my family are this. Your expectation of my family is not real. And I put them in their place. They shut up.
That's right.
And you can't put us in a box because there are certain expectations, because my family from slavery to now, they always said education was the key. And that's what my family was based on. And the success is based on education, because at least you know and can comprehend and be successful.
Yes.
Well,
And it's not
before
going to
we
stop you from experiencing stuff, but
yeah, before we move on to the next topic, which we could segue right in when you said education, and let's bring on Dr. Benjamin Chavis, our president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, and we thank our guests. I've listened to the rest of the show earlier. It's great. Thank you so much for being on the Black Press of America.
thank you.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Doc. The Education Department announced fixes on Tuesday to multiple student loan programs, giving thousands of borrowers immediate relief from student loan debt and bringing millions more years closer to having their student loans forgiven. It comes as the Biden administration continues to examine canceling student loan debt for millions of Americans. The changes are being made to the public service loan forgiveness programs and the income-driven repayment plans. According to the Education Department, the fixes will give 40,000 borrowers immediate forgiveness and bring at least 3.6 million borrowers closer to relief by at least 3 years through income-driven repayment. Student loans were never meant to be a life sentence, but it certainly felt that way for borrowers locked out of debt relief they're eligible for, according to Secretary Miguel Cardona. So let's start with you, Doc. This student loan forgiveness, we know students struggle, particularly our students of color.
Absolutely. In communities of color, and particularly African Americans and Latinos, loan debt has been a form of in servitude, and it gets larger and larger. The interest rates keeps changing. So this is the Biden-Harris administration again keeping its promise that it would tackle this issue of debt relief, of loan forgiveness, student loan forgiveness. And I believe that ultimately this will serve the economic interests of our communities.
Yeah, and Andrea and Terry. Well, let me start with Andrea, and then Terry, you can jump in on this too. There has been some folks saying, well, if they forgive all student loan debt, many folks who have student loan debt or some sort of loans out, many of them can afford it. They can pay for it, and it would help them even more than it would help those who can't afford it. What do you say to that?
Well, as someone who's still paying off their student loans,
Ooh.
yes, trust me, I didn't think I'd be paying it on, but I mean, at the same time, there's been circumstances through the years of where, as a working journalist, I couldn't afford to pay my student loan, and I had to go into forbearance a number of times, or at least get it down to where I was able to pay on it, and that's extended the life of paying off, and I've seen some interest go up because of that. And I mean, those are life decisions. I didn't think I'd be still paying on it this long, but any relief is relief. And it affects your credit as well. So I'm just waiting to see what happens because it's been extended time and time again of when I don't have to pay it back, or at least I'm going to start paying on it again. And I've been keeping on the updates, but it shouldn't be a life sentence. It should be somehow we need to be able to figure out at a certain point, you got to forgive the rest. If you paid on it for so long, forgive it. Because it shouldn't be this way. If we want our children to be educated and go to college and or go get a skill, and we got to get a loan to get that training, it shouldn't be a life sentence to pay it off, because I'm reaping the benefits of my education right now. I mean, I would not be on this show if I had not gone to college and gotten a college degree in journalism. I mean, I'm a success for what I did, but I shouldn't still be paying for it down the road. But I hope something happens of where if my payment is less than what it is, or at least cut in half, I'll be a happy camper to finish paying it off, because there's a road to that end. Right now, no one is seeing the end of the road. And I think that's what's making things a little stressful for people, having to start repaying back their student loans again.
I
Yeah.
agree with Andrea. The fact that we tell young people, get an education, how important that is. You can't afford it, get a loan. But then nobody talks about what happens at the end when you get that degree, and then they send you a note, hey, you owe us this much. I have a daughter right now that is still paying student loans, and I see that letter in the mail and I'm like, oh, this is your mail.
And I mean, and I want to go back and get my master's, because I
Uh-huh.
want to get my master's because I would like to teach on a college level, but I don't want to do it by getting a loan, because
Right.
I started a master's degrees program that I had to stop for certain reasons, and I'm still paying off that loan, which I didn't see the end result of what it was for, and because of that, I'm just like, oh my God, but I still want to pursue that dream.
Right.
And now I'm trying to figure out how to do it without getting another loan, because I
Right.
also want to buy a house. I
Well,
can't do both. So,
and Andrea, speaking of that, James Wright says student loan is a barrier to home ownership, especially for African Americans. David
mhm.
Youngblood said all student debt should be canceled. No student should have to go into debt for an education. And again, Claudette Perry says that to you, Andrea, she says, I have done the same. I always say it's my reparations. Dr. Chavis, we'll leave the last word to you on that. I see what Andrea is saying, and certainly what Ms. Perry said about they look at it as their reparations.
Well, our foreparents knew that education was the key to our liberation, and it is still the key to our liberation. But in attaining a good education, undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate, we have to make sure that we pay attention to the economic side. There should always be a balance. The more education you get, the less debt you should have, not the more debt you should have. And so I think that the loan forgiveness, loan counselization is something that the Biden-Harris administration should continue to lead on. And then when it's time for people to vote, people say, well, that my vote doesn't count. We have nothing to vote for. We have a lot to vote for. And 2022 is the midterm elections. And I'm concerned that in Black America, we've been kind of socialized to be lukewarm about voting. Voting makes a difference. And loan debt cancellation is a prime example that voting makes a difference. Because you let this other crowd get back in, there will be no loan forgiveness.
No.
And Dr. Chavis, we have less than a minute, so we got a big event coming up. Fill everyone in on the NNPA's summer convention.
Right, June 22nd through the 25th in New Orleans. We're going to have the national convention, annual 2022 convention. Please go to nnpa-events.com, nnpa-events.com. To register, I will announce in these last seconds that the phenomenal Stephanie Mills will be performing at the NNPA National Convention in New Orleans. Please register. Got a great room rates at the Riverside Hotel and the Hilton in New Orleans. So please go to that website and register. We look forward to seeing everyone in New Orleans in June.
Yep. Everybody's invited. And if you could also go on that website, like Dr. Chavis said, you'll get a great hotel rate at a great hotel. And you also can buy tickets to the Legacy Awards where Stephanie Mills will be performing. Join us. We love to see you there. And we pay tribute to the one and only Prince Rogers Nelson, who died 6 years ago today. And we also pay tribute to Blackish, which most people will miss. Thanks for joining. Let it be known. We'll see you tomorrow.